So it's funny, when I recorded that video last week, I thought I was almost done. Welcome to Mike Texted Out. I'm Mike, and this is Building the Steam Deck Dock Part 2. I believe that's the title. I think I said it wrong in the last video. There's like 3 different titles, I think, that I use. Anyway, this is Part 2. In Part 1, we went over the USB hub and the adapter that's going into the dock and tested them as well. That video is linked up above now-ish. I hope this is the right side. But this video, we're going to focus on the 3D print portion of it. And if you can't tell by this, it didn't go too well. So let's go back to last week's video where I was printing that mountain, that massive heap. Let's start how I got there in the first place. I was super excited about building this dock. I was like, I want something customized for my Steam Deck. This would be kind of a cool project. I could do a video about it. Then I went and downloaded the STL files from Hanover2K. That was the original Reddit user that created this dock. And then I realized, I was like, oh yeah, the Steam Deck dock is actually wider than my print bed in all directions. By the way, this is the dock that I was printing last week. It's not finished, it doesn't have the back part. I'll explain why in a little bit. But yeah, the reason I got there last week where I did that massive mountain print and wasted a bunch of PLA like the person, very nicely by the way, suggested in last week's video in the comments. But I looked at the Reddit thread and someone was like, yeah, it's too big for my print bed. And they're like, yeah, I had to print it diagonally. And I was like, oh, diagonally, that makes so much sense. And of course, it still didn't fit diagonally, but if I tilted it up enough, it did fit. And so that's how I ended up getting this massive mountain. It was the only way I could get it to print. And I did that, and that took 2.5 days, which is why I missed the deadline of having it done by last week's video. But also in last week's video, I assumed that when the print finished, I would just be done with it. I would just take it off the supports and sand it down. It printed some supports in some weird places, and the back part of the dock is very flimsy. It's very nice looking, but because the plastic is so thin and PLA is already pretty brittle, I ended up breaking it, taking off this weird chunk of the support. So finally, I was like, you know what? I give up. My crafting skills aren't great, but I'm gonna try to make this work the best that I can. I'm gonna split this thing into 2. So I downloaded Mesh Mixer, and I very quickly, I split it into 2. I put some holes in there so I could put 2 connectors in there to connect it before I glued it. And I did like 3 or 4 of these prints, and they all just had issues. For one, because I was lazy and cut the end diagonally on the main piece, it had to add supports, and it added it right where the 2 holes are for the connectors. It was hard to get the supports off without then breaking the holes because the plastic there was already thin. 2, I was having an extrusion issue. My printer has been over extruding. I'm gonna be honest, this is a newer printer to me. It's not a new printer in general, it's actually already a newer version of it, but I ended up buying an Ender 3 last year because my original DaVinci Jr., which I had for 5 years, the nozzle clogged, and every time I did get it unclogged, it would just clog again. I wanted to replace the nozzle, but it was like $100, and I was like, I can just get a whole new printer with a bigger print bed, with a heated bed for like $150. So that's what I ended up doing. I got the Ender 3 because the Ender 3 V2 was like $200 something. The 3 was on sale, and it's a major upgrade from my last printer. But I have had an over extrusion issue with that printer since day one, where it just prints too much plastic. I didn't have that much of an issue with the initial print. There was some over extrusion, but the prints after that, it was just awful. So when I was troubleshooting, I was adjusting the flow rate in my splicer. I was readjusting my bed every time. I was lowering the temperature. I was doing all the things, and I even printed a test cube, which I have right here for some reason. But little test cube came out perfectly. No over extruding. Cool. Went back to the drawing board again, took it back in the Mesh Mixer. I cut it this time so I didn't have to print any supports. I made sure not to cut it at an angle on either side. I only added 1 connector piece, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna print this at high quality. I got this good print out of here with no issues. Everything should be good. And so I printed it again, and it's still over extruded. At this point, it had been like almost a week. And I already told myself before I did that print, I was like, this is the last print, because whatever is going on with my printer over extruding, I don't have enough time to troubleshoot it right now, nor do I feel like it. I had done so many prints that I was just burned out. I was tired of hearing 3D print sounds in my ear while I was working. So I took this, I actually went to Michael's, the craft store. Not me, Michael's, the craft store Michaels. And I picked up some paint because I decided I was going to paint it. Since I had to glue it together, I was like, that might help a little bit. I also had to go to Home Depot over the weekend to get some filters for my AC unit, so I picked up some plastic glue, which is literally just super glue. It was literally just super glue. Super glued the pieces together. I ended up not using the connector at all because it didn't print properly. Like, I printed a little base on it and I just didn't feel like sanding it down. And so I actually bought a Dremel because I was prepared to like cut this thing and sand this thing down even more. And I didn't. I just decided to go with new print, but that was one of my ideas, was just to print a new back part for this and just glue it up here. It probably would have worked better and saved me a lot of headache. I should have probably just done that. So I glued that together. I sanded it down as much as I can. I used the Dremel because I already bought it anyway. And I'm going to just tell you now, my anything crafting and painting is not good. So I got that sanded down, and then I ended up breaking it again. So the funny thing is, there's 3 times that I attempted to remove supports from the back of the dock. First time I broke the actual thing in half. The second time on a throwaway print, I did it perfectly. And I was like, okay, now I know how to do this. You gotta be really careful. And then on my final print, I ended up breaking some of the covers for the USB ports. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. They're not that important. Yeah, I still would have looked a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, but it's fine. Went ahead and painted it. I painted this color, this purple color, because I wanted to do something different. I like my lighter colors, especially when I'm dealing with like something darker like the Steam Deck. So I decided to go with a purple called Aromatherapy. I don't know why they called it that. Like, it just seems like a bad name for a paint because you're not really supposed to stuff paint that much. I feel like people might buy it and be like, ooh, I'm really enjoying the smell of this. And then they just pass out. Anyway, got this purple color, Aromatherapy. So initially I did 2 coats with the Aromatherapy purple paint. And I should have stopped there because it was good. It was looking really good. But I was like, let me just do another coat to try to get it, you know, smooth it out a little bit more. And then I completely messed it up. I had to sand it down because I accidentally started covering up the letters. And it's a whole mess. I made it worse by overpainting it, so I just ended up finishing it with a glossy finish. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. It's far from perfect, but I actually like the way that it turned out. I really like the color. It really contrasts with the darkness of the Steam Deck. Plus, if I decide to do like my white Steam Deck in the future, it's gonna look really good. Another thing I changed from the original instructions, I did get the screws, but I did not end up using them. I had some white thumbtacks, and I thought with this color they looked a little bit better. Plus, the holes didn't fill out completely, so I was gonna have to put something sharp in there to kind of get them the rest of the way anyway. And I was like, you know what, why don't I just use these tacks instead? Screws are definitely better, but I just like the way these look better. I definitely didn't do the best job with this. Like I said, crafting is not my strong suit, but I like the way that it turned out. As chaotic as this project was, and as not good as a lot of this looks, I had a lot of fun with this project. And that's kind of the whole thing of building something like this. Like, yes, you can buy a dock for the Steam Deck. They have third-party ones that would have been around the same price as buying just the USB hub that goes in here. But just to have like your own customized version of the dock that you can paint or do whatever with, it's kind of cool. I did mess up the paint, but this actually gives it more of a kind of like a porcelain look almost, just the way that the paint turned out. It kind of looks like something like a handmade porcelain Steam Deck. You can see here where it's definitely split. This is where I glued the second piece on. But yeah, I'll be the first to admit it's not the greatest dock. The print didn't turn out right. I still have to troubleshoot my 3D printer to figure out why I was over extruding. And I will definitely be open to revisiting this project in the future once I get those issues ironed out with my printer. Like I said, I'm still learning it. My last one I had for 5 years, so I knew the ins and outs of that printer. I knew how to get good prints most of the time as long as the nozzles didn't clog, which happened a lot with that printer. If you do want this for your Steam Deck and don't have a 3D printer, there are services that you can order prints from. The link to the actual .stl files are in the description, along with the link to the original Reddit thread, so I can credit the person that created this, the user Hanover2K. That's in the description. But yeah, overall this was a lot of fun. I know this may look a little bit fugly and weird, but it's my fugly weird project and I'm pretty happy with it. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell notification to get notified when I drop a video, and always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace.